Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to start out this session today. Thank you again for joining us. It's the WID Wednesday with Studio Loose Architects. This project that we'll be talking about, it's an incredible project by one of the Women in Design Award of Excellence winners. You'll hear more from her and some other folks involved on the project. I just wanted to open by saying, giving an introduction to the symposium that we're all attending. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Mary McCarthy. I am an architect and a member of the Women in Design, the BSA's Women in Design Symposium Committee. Having the symposium outside of ABX this year gave us an opportunity to reimagine what the event could be. Women in Design joined forces with BosNOMA, and through that collaboration decided on a theme of intersections for a discussion. We did outreach and spoke with many other knowledge communities and BSA members, which has brought us to this week packed with activities. We sent out a call for proposals and were honestly blown away by the events and sessions that were submitted. In particular, we're pleased with the wide range of presenter roles and lived experience that really drives home the intersections theme. So today, you can see on the screen, this is our third event today, and then we have some events Thursday and Friday, mostly virtual, but a few of them, especially tomorrow at the BSA space, and a few in-person activities on Friday as well. So we welcome you to join us, and we'll drop in the chat a link to those sessions. Just going to the next slide, talking a little bit about logistics. This session, it does have HSW credits, so the link will be dropped into the chat just a few minutes into the session, so you can put in your name and AA number to get credit for this. Questions can be submitted through the question and answer chat, but you can also raise your hand and one of the moderators can call on you during the discussion, and you can be requested to speak. But if you prefer just to drop your question in the Q&A, that's perfectly fine too. If you have any technical issues during a session, Madeline Hikes is working behind the scenes to make this all run. So please send her a message through the chat or call her directly. So again, as I mentioned today, we're here to hear about Studio Loose Architects and their project Sociedad Latina. This is presented in conjunction with the Women in Design WID Wednesdays. So WID Wednesdays are roughly once a month. The WID Wednesday committee brings together designers of interesting projects throughout the city. Pre-COVID, we would do site tours, but the designers involved, and most often we're targeting projects that are by women and other and underrepresented folks in the architecture community to talk about their projects. So feel free to look on the BSA website. There's more information about upcoming events through the WID Wednesday. But I'll now hand it off to Emily Bell and Keely Winchell. They'll introduce you to the presenters on the project that we'll be discussing. So thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Mary. As she said, Kaylee and I lead the Networking and Design subcommittee at Women in Design, and we try to put on an event of this format, what you're experiencing tonight, about once a month. And next year we look forward to hosting some in-person events. So if you enjoy this, keep an eye out for the virtual events next year, and we will also be leading design tours in person. So you have that to look forward to. Yeah, thanks for joining everybody. So Kayla will do our introductions and we'll get started.
So tonight we'll be talking to Hansy Barraza, who's co-founder and principal of Studio Luz. And we'll also have Alex Oliver Davila, who is the director at Sociedad Latina, and Emily Bozick, who's a project manager at Haynes Group in construction management. So take it away.
Thank you so much, BosNOMA and Women in Design. We're so excited to be here with you today to present to you our project for Sociedad Latina. When I was asked to put together this group of people to talk about Sociedad Latina, I thought it would be amazing to really bring two amazing women leaders, activists to this conversation to really give you kind of what goes behind putting a project like this. What are the inner workings? What is the financial structure that makes a project like this happen? So this presentation is really a conversation between myself as the architect, who also had team members, as part of the workings of making it happen, with Alex, the client, and also the project manager, Emily Bozak, to present to you some of the challenges of the project. So just to give you in terms of structure, Alex is going to give about 20-minute presentation about this organization and its mission. Emily will discuss a little bit about the construction process, and then I would conclude it with giving you a little bit of the process that it took. I know my audience is a lot of early on designers, that are interested in, what goes behind a project like this. And it's definitely not one of immediacy. Like, to make this project happen is not your typical, 1-year span of a project. It is a duration, and I can go ahead and expand on that. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers, and I encourage you to take the mic and, ask us, ask us out loud versus doing it on the commentary. So just to give an appropriate introduction, Alexandra Oliver Davila. Alexandra is an executive director for Sociedad Latina. She has been involved in advocacy for the Latin communities for over 20 years. She, is leading the organization since it's founded in 1968, which caters to at-risk Latino youth in Mission Hill. Alex started as Sociedad Latina in 1999, and she has transformed the organization. She has grown it quadruply in terms of its budget. She has expanded its membership. She has provided the center open to all of youth, not only just Latino, but the demographics that surround Mission Hill. She has led the organization to cutting edge technology, creating maker spaces in the building itself. She's an advocate. She has brought in the program and has developed a pathway for success model. I wanted to make sure that I gave Alex the appropriate introduction that she deserves. Thank you so much, Alex. I'm going to have you take it away to explain more about the organization.
Great. Thank you, Hansy. And it was great to work with you and great to work with Emily. Like you said, this is a long-term project. So actually, we're talking about a certain period of time, but this conversation at Sociedad Latina had been ongoing since I probably arrived there, just thinking about the shifting demographics of the neighborhood and the institutional expansion around us and the cost of renting or buying, and preferably we wanted to purchase something. So we can definitely talk more about that at the end, but I just want to say thank you for having me here this evening. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about Sociedad Latina. I'll try not to talk the whole 20 minutes, but I do get very excited I have been at the organization for 21 years, and I am so blessed to be able to work at Sociedad Latina. It is my life's work. My mission in life is to work particularly with Latinx youth, with all young people, of course, but I have a specific passion as a Latina woman, and as somebody who came to Boston in middle school time and just faced a lot of personal racism towards me because of my heritage and my culture and my language. And so that has really propelled me to make a space where Latinx youth feel comfortable around their language and their culture, and view that as assets. So you can go to the next slide, please. And that's some of our young people, and actually a couple of them work at Sociedad Latina. They have been with us for many, many years. So our mission is to create the next generation of Latinx young people. And that is so important when we look at the context of what's happening nationally. And when we look at the context of what our Latinx community is facing in terms of underrepresentation in every sector, we're underrepresented. We're not at the table when decisions are made. We're not in places where, policies are being pushed. And so we want to make sure that we're changing the game. When we look also at economically, if you look at Massachusetts is the #1 state for Latino income inequality. So there's a lot of things that we are working towards, and making sure that we have young people that are active in their community and that can play a leadership role to take those, positions of power and really make changes. Many times policies are made intended for a specific population without actually including that population. So we're really trying to change the game on that. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of our organization. We actually work with students over a long period of time, which is what we call our pathways. So we start working with students in middle school. We did that because we found at one point, when I started 20 years ago, we mostly focused on high school, and then we moved down to the middle school because we realized that students really need to just start much earlier in terms of academics, also in terms of career pathways. Students decide very early, what they want to do. And so we do work with Boston Public School students, and 75% self-identify as Latinx. And 50% live or go to school in the Mission Hill Roxbury neighborhood. And the Roxbury neighborhood has the highest number of young people in the city. And 66% are English language learners, which I use that language. I prefer to say bilingual students, but I know people won't understand. But I think we need to move away from that deficit, description of young people. And then 100% live at or below the poverty line. And I say all these things, and I always feel uncomfortable. I'll just put it out there. It is a representation that is always deficit, and it really pains me to talk about it that way. So I also want to share with you the assets. I think our assets are our language, our culture, the collectivism that comes from our community, the family involvement that we have, strong families, we have high aspirations, and we are multicultural. Next slide, please. And so I didn't mention the challenges because they're also in this slide as well, which is I mentioned earlier. Our young people face lots of discrimination, adults too, but we have kind of weathered the storm, and there's just so much research around discrimination and racism and the negative health effects that it has on young people. And so that is why it's really important that we have a center where young people can feel celebrated and they don't feel like they have to check their culture at the door. We know that that sense of belonging actually creates long-term positive engagement, both in society and in school. And we know that staying in school is a game changer. A high school graduation is very important, and even more important is having a post-secondary degree. And I say that also, I don't think college is for everybody, and that's okay. I think the thing that I would say about that is that we know that economically it is a game changer, and that a college student earns $1 million more over a lifetime than a high school graduate. So the other kind of issues that we face are not having access. So I talked about just not being at the table, basically, but then it's also not having networks. So many of our young people don't have traditional networks that their white peers have in terms of access to higher education or access to employment. And we also work with a large percentage of undocumented young people. And as you know, that carries a lot of fear. It carries a lot of stigmatism. And so we again want to make young people feel comfortable to come to our space. And then if you just look at the demographics, our population is growing by, 2050, like 3 out of 5 students are going to be Latinx. So I think we have a responsibility as a nation to make sure that our young people are actually successful and successful in their next steps. If you could go to the next slide. So this is our pathways to success, which is kind of some of the things that I already mentioned, that we really look at the work that we do in a very asset-based approach. We celebrate bilingualism, we celebrate multiculturalism, we celebrate the families. We are very invested in making sure that young people use their voice. They already have a voice. They need support to be able to be heard. We know that lots of times people want to roll their eyes at young people, but I say young people are the ones that make the change and bring it on. And so we want to create that space for them. And then the space again to just affirm their positive cultural identity to build resiliency. And then our pathways to success is young people coming through our program and they receive our 4 pillars, which is academic support. So all young people who come to our program receive academic support. We focus on cultural wealth building. And so we have our own curriculum we created around cultural exploration. All of our programs include some kind of arts in it because we know that that really engages young people. And we focus on civic engagement, again, because we feel we can't really change the game unless young people can identify issues happening in their community and can actually do something about it. Next slide. So we focus both on in-school and out-of-school time programming, and this is just a slide to kind of denote what it looks like. So when we start in middle school, we have a STEAM team, which is STEM and Arts program for middle school. And we work with families around transitions into high school and figuring out like what's the best high school for students. And while they're in high school, they can participate in a number of these programs. All young people, we have a specific internship program, and all young people who are part of our program gain an internship experience. We also work with some of our surrounding colleges around dual enrollment through our Academy for Latinos Achieving Success. And so we actually follow students into post-secondary, whether they are going to college or they are employed. We actually provide a coach for 2 years, and 86% of youth that we work with who are going to college remain in college. I say that this is 2 years back. It's a whole different ballgame now that we're talking about what has happened with COVID and the pandemic and the decrease that we've seen in college enrollment for Latina youth particularly. But this is just a snapshot of our out-of-school time programs. And so we have young people that are in paid and unpaid opportunities. So some young people receive a stipend, some young people are on payroll, some young people are volunteering, some young people are just coming to some of our arts programming that's free. So we have like a mix of ways that young people can be involved in our program. Next slide. And this is our school-based programming, which includes arts. It includes an entrepreneurship program and our Escalera program, which is for focuses on our bilingual young people and just figuring out their next steps into college and career. Next slide. So this is just a picture of our STEM program, our STEAM team, middle school program, and we actually are based in a couple of schools. We have a 21st Century grant. And so we are right now in the process of expanding our STEM program into high school. This program, STEAM team, is our most expensive program. We have the most amount of staff, and we are really focused on trying to make science and math and technology, make it exciting for young people. We know that in the STEM field we are very, very underrepresented as a community. And we know that many STEM careers can really be game changers for families in terms of economics. So we really want to create this opportunity, and especially given in the area and the neighborhood and the state that we're in, it is something that for us just made sense when we looked at the scores of young people, the MCAS scores in science and math for particularly Latinx youth. And so we decided to go in this direction. And we have a bunch of wonderful partners that we work with. So next slide. And you can find all of this information on our website. So I'm not going to read through every single thing, but this just goes into more detail about the programs that I just talked about. And one thing that I will say is we do have a focus in the summer. So in the summer, all of our students, we focus on stemming learning loss. So all the programs that you saw all come together in the summer, and they include an academic portion during the summer program. Because we have found true learning loss, particularly for Latinx youth and for just students of color in general, that we know is very, very real, that doesn't happen in more wealthier white communities where there's more opportunities to do things during the summer, to get more skills, et cetera. So we focus really heavily on that. And we actually hire teachers to work with us side by side. And we make it exciting because we take something like, for example, we have our entrepreneurship program in the summer. And so students are learning how to build a business. So they do a business plan, they do a budget for the business, they do marketing, and then they do a presentation at the end, and they present and pitch what they're doing. And so it's just something that we do that is hands-on and that is related to things that young people are interested in, so we can make the academic portion exciting. Next slide. And these are just a few of our partners. Next slide. So our civic engagement program, as I mentioned, everything we do, if we don't do this, then I cannot live with myself if young people do not leave our organization without understanding how to identify some of the societal issues that young people, Latinx, students of color are facing, and what it is that we can do about it. And we've had tons of wins in our civic engagement program. We've passed policies. We focus both on education reform and then just quality of life that is looked at through the lens of the Latinx community. And so we've worked on campaigns to increase the number of Latinx administrators and teachers in the public schools. We are most recently working on an ethnic studies campaign, and we've been working for a decade on that. We're really excited that we have some legislation pending to create a statewide commission where ethnic studies would be looked at more deeply. We would figure out what are the resources that are needed to be able to implement it across all districts. What's the professional development look like? What's the design look like? Versus I think sometimes when you have policy, you just say, hey, go out and do it. And there's not a plan. So we put forth, our young people have met with state reps, state senators to pass that forward. So that's just an example of kind of the work that we do. And so you see like at State House where we're constantly advocating for different pieces of policy and legislation. Next slide. And so our other program is called Health Educators, and that is really around engaging young people around health and nutrition and fitness and sexual health. And they have also worked on some policies. Just to give you an example, they worked around sugar sweetened beverages and passing some policies around actually having a sugar tax. And then also they were successful in going around Boston and counting the number of storefront advertisements that were unhealthy. And were able to work with our city councilor and work with the Public Health Commission to look at the neighborhoods and see the neighborhoods that had the highest amount of unhealthy storefront signage also had the highest numbers of like unhealthy issues in their community. And so we were able to work with ISD and we found a loophole, which we were able to work with ISD to make sure that no more than 33% of your storefront can be covered with any type of unhealthy advertising. So that's kind of the work that our young people are doing. Next slide. Some of our key partners again, next slide. And then our workforce development program, we work with the Longwood medical area, with the cultural institutions that we are surrounded by. And then we also have some partnerships with different city councilors, with different law firms. So whatever our young people are interested in, we match what they're interested in because we want to give them a taste of what does it mean to work. And then we also, we have our own work readiness curriculum. And then we also use Signal Success, which is research-based statewide approved workforce development curriculum that is used again across the state. And so we want to make sure that young people, know what it's like to be in that kind of atmosphere. We've had a lot of success with young people also getting entry-level jobs for those young people whose path is not necessarily into college or who also cannot go to school full-time. So they're able to get a job and then go to school part-time. Next slide. And then I already talked about our entrepreneurship program and our internship, so I won't go too deep into that. Next slide. I think it's our partners, and we have many more. I think we need to update this. It's been a while since we've done like presentations through the pandemic. We've really only been talking so much about the impact of COVID on our organization. Next slide. And then our arts and culture. So, we were so excited with this building to be able to really focus on that space and make it soundproof. I mean, I've gotten used to like the noise that comes from like our music program. I love it, I don't know that all of our neighbors love it. So I think that has been really key. But we have, young people who are interested in the arts, not, and the great thing about it is, I have so many examples, and one of our board members is on. Thank you for being with us. One of our board members, alumni who's on our board, actually came through our music program. He was failing all his classes and was not interested, nor did he know about, the opportunities to go to college. And through being in the music program, he was able to discover that he actually liked making beats, and he always liked being behind the scenes and making music. And we worked with him, and he was able to enter into a community college. And then we also supported him and worked with him to actually transfer to Wentworth Institute of Technology. And he's actually going to be graduating as an electrical engineer. So that's why it's important to have different kinds of programs or different kinds of interests for young people, because one way or the other, they get interested, and then we slide in all the other things that maybe don't sound like fun, but necessary, like the academic support, and really just do like that whole holistic approach. Next slide. And so we have a whole host of both in-school and after-school programming in the arts. And then we also have an alumni program. So we have an alumni band and we have an alumni program, which I'm really proud of all the work that we've done. Young people, they keep coming back. So we have an alumni advisory that puts together events for our alumni. And then our alumni band that plays alone and also plays with our high school and middle school young people in our music department. Next slide. And those are just some of our key partners again. Next slide. And then our family engagement, we can't do what we do without families. I think any youth organization that talks about just working with young people without talking about the family is just missing the whole point. We are not the parents. We have to work in partnership, and we just work to support what's already a great relationship with your children and make it even better. And we work really closely with parents. We tell them that this is like a 7 to 10 year relationship. And so we get to know families really, really well. And we always say, if stick with us and we can show you, all these positive outcomes. And, families are the fabric of the work that we do, and we couldn't do it without them. Next slide. And so we work with families just casually, like in terms of checking in. They don't have to volunteer, be part of our programs, but we also offer a lot of different things for our families that range from, helping a parent or caretaker to go into a school if there's an issue and like interpret for them, figuring out like how to navigate the school system. So it's a whole gamut of things. And it also includes just health things like looking at like screen time, looking at bullying. How do you work with young people around getting them more active? So we call that our Padres Comprometidos. We have ongoing workshops all year round to just engage families. And we ask them also what they're interested in. And we try to bring people to focus on the interests that families have. Next slide. And so I think when we, Hansy, when we met, this was our trajectory. We had grown so much over a short period of time, and we still have waiting lists. So we work with young people in like a day-to-day basis, about 500, and then advocates are 4+ activities, and then just one-time events that where we meet young people. So when we met Hansy, we were at this crossroad of we'd grown so much. Our building is a triple decker and is not suited to really work with young people. We looked all over Boston to see if we could find different space to move to either rent or buy. And we decided, the board decided that, you know what, we're going to stay in Mission Hill. We've been in Mission Hill for 30+ years, and we have such amazing relationships with the Longwood Medical Area, with Colleges of Fenway. And so we said, we're going to put a stake in the ground and we're going to stay here. We don't know what it's going to look like. Next slide. And then we were able to meet with our landlord and negotiate. And I'll talk a little bit more about that after. And this, I'm not going to talk about this. This is all just to tell you that we take our work really seriously. This is all of the evaluations that we do across our programs, both externally in terms of how young people are doing, and then internally we also hear from young people. So we do an assessment twice a year that lets us know from the perspective of the young people we're working with how it is that we are doing. Next slide. And this is, again, this is our impact pre-COVID. I think we are still doing well in terms of engaging young people, but we shall see what is going to happen. I'm sure most of you know the mental health crisis that our young people are facing, and especially young people of color whose families were hit the hardest in terms of economically, loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of family members. So I'm really proud that, pre-COVID, our rates were 100% high school graduation. 100% on-time promotion for the students that we work with. Next slide. And so I'll just rail through these and just say that this was kind of like a moment in time, as I was saying before. We met Hansy, we started looking around. So we met with our landlord, we were able to talk with him. He loved our work so much. He said, you know what, yes, I will sell it to you. And he sold it to us at the praised price, which he could have gotten so much more money for this building. And so we're really, really grateful for that. We really needed a space that's in this century. I mean, if you had come to our space before, it was, you know, one side is hot, one side is cold. There was lots of rodents running around all the time. They didn't pay rent and they were just always climbing around on people's desks. And it was just, you know, again, like not being soundproof, like it's just was not suitable. We did the best that we could. And we think our youth deserve more than that. And so we wanted to also make sure we had a space to stay in, again, considering what's happening in Boston with the real estate market. We wanted to make sure we had a home for the long term for our young people. And so we said, you know, we're going to figure it out. We don't know how it's going to happen. We were very fortunate. Our local partners, our colleges and our medical institutions, they all gave money towards this project. The city also gave money towards this project. And then we had funders who came together and gave us money. We also took advantage that it was our 50th anniversary. So we had a gala at the MFA and we were able to secure funding from foundations to support that event, as well as just people coming to the event. And so we were really, our capital campaign was about the building and the renovation of the building, the purchase, renovation of the building, but then also our staffing had not grown. So we had this astronomical growth with young people and our staffing hadn't grown. So that is part of our campaign is not over, but with COVID, we took a big hit on that. But we're going to continue to really try to raise money to make sure that we have appropriate staffing so we can go deeper with our youth. We're not trying to work with more youth. I think we have more than we can handle right now. We really want to go deeper and more so now with just the effects of COVID and the things that we have seen and the struggles that our families have been through. And so I'm going to stop talking now because I've talked a lot and just say, you know, it was an exciting project. It's so awesome to walk into a building that's just bright and light and clean and warm when it's supposed to be and cool when it's supposed to be, and to be able to have like a great kitchen, to be able to, the glass that we have in the building and be able to like see people through, and just like the staff is so excited and the youth are so excited. And I'm just like so thrilled. You know, I am a firm believer in writing things down and they will happen. And I have my journals from when I started at Sociedad, and it says, I will buy the building, I will renovate it. And so I'm excited that I could still be here to be part of this. So thank you again for letting me be here, and I will stop with that.
Thank you so much, Alex. As I mentioned, that this was going to be a conversation piece as well. And I just wanted to put it out there because it was a question during your presentation. If you can just define what Latin A means, just for the audience.
Oh, sure, of course. So Latino is a lot of young people struggle with Latina because it's very it's not gender neutral terms, and so we've moved to this Latinx, which I'm not against, but I have a hard time with Latinx just because I feel we have such a beautiful language that, you know, putting all these X's, I have a hard time. So my compromise is Latin, so that way it is gender neutral to encompass and to be inclusive. And so that's why I've started to use Latin versus Latinx, which again, I'm not against, but my daughter has schooled me on that. And so I feel like, you know, using Latin is gender neutral.
Thank you so much, Alex. You still had a couple of slides forward, and is it okay for me to transition to Emily, or would you like to speak on some
Yes,
of
I
these?
feel like I've spoken a lot, and I'll probably
Okay.
just repeat myself, and I'll probably repeat some of the things that you're saying as well. so.
Okay, so just to let everyone know, this is the information for Sociedad Latina. If you'd like to volunteer or contribute or get a hold of Alex, here's the information. I would like to now take this opportunity to introduce Emily Bozak, who was the project manager for this project from the Haynes Group. And Emily, she was amazing. When I first went to the first meeting and I saw a whole bunch of men there in the as you know, in the construction industry is majority men. And then I saw that Emily was our project manager and running the show. It was with so much excitement to bring her back here to, share with her and her knowledge to everyone, listening in. Emily was responsible for safety compliance, woman power, not necessarily manpower, materials, to meet the project schedule. She was the main point of contact. She negotiated between the neighbors. She had a great track record, always prompt with any questions that we had. And what I love mostly is that she was definitely an out-of-box thinker with some of the challenges that came up on the site. So I want to take this moment to introduce Emily. Thank you, Emily. Take it on from here.
Thank you so much. Sorry, just listening to you, Alex, I am just very moved, and I'm moved to be on this project. Everything that you're saying, when I walked in the space when it finished, so I guess I'm going to finish the end, but just kind of how we're at right now and in what you had just said, I'm very moved. I remember walking through the space at the end and having tears in my eyes and saying, I really hope we brought their vision to life. And just listening to what you said, it sounds like we did. What you do for the young community is amazing. So thank you, everybody, for letting me be here and for letting me be your project manager, because it was such a great experience for me. It was a great learning experience for me. I have only become a better project manager because of this opportunity. Next slide. Just a little bit about the project itself. As Alex said, it was an existing building, a 3-story building. And it was rough around the edges. And I honestly love buildings in Boston because you get to find the beauty in the spaces where maybe everybody forgot there was beauty. This project, we renovated the inside. We had to bring new services in, so we had to get into the street. It's such a small area of work that it was very hard logistically to have lay down space for materials, to have material deliveries. We were also working on the patio, so we didn't want to take too much space of the patio space. And then we were doing some exterior renovations, the storefront, the windows, putting in new windows, as well as a new roof. What was interesting about this project as well is that it happened right in COVID. So we just started the project, we had just started demo, and all of a sudden the world changed. And our project was built on everybody being on top of each other so we could get the project done very quickly. And we had to switch gears. We started with temperature checks. Everybody was wearing gloves, masks. We were trying to keep the project going as well as keep people safe, especially in a world where we didn't know how to navigate. I had such a great superintendent on the site, and I think he really got what we were doing here. Him and I worked close together to make sure that we didn't let COVID stop this job. We were not going to quit because a pandemic happened, because this was such a great project to deliver to the community. Next slide. We had an awesome team. I would say that working with Studio Louise and Sociedad Latina, or I'm gonna not say it correctly, was awesome. When we were on site, we're gonna run into difficulties. It is an older building. There's uniqueness to it. What's on the plans isn't always what what's there because you are dealing with an existing building. So having direct contact with the architect at all points. Steve was calling and we were getting answers right away, or the team was stopping by to help us work through something that unforeseen conditions. What we don't like to do is pass on additional changes to the client. So there were times where there may have been a place where we would typically have had to pass on a change, and we worked together with Studio Louise and the team to figure out a better workaround, so we weren't having to pass on a lot of costs. I mean, I do understand where we are at with funding and everything. So in general, without the teamwork we had with this project, I don't think it would have turned out the way it did. How I like to look at it is we get a piece of artwork handed to us, and it's our job to make sure that we're giving that piece back to the architect and the client and how they want it. Next slide. So Alex was talking about the before and afters, and I love this slide because it really does show how beautiful the space is now. Where I remember the first time we walked in and Steve was on site and he was a site super, just we had taken out that staircase in the before in this first picture. And I walked in, I'm like, you weren't supposed to take that out. And he just kind of get the uh-oh look. But now, as you can see, it was the perfect space for their reception desk. And it's just breathtaking. Next slide. So like I had said, this project was just so special to me. It will always be special to me. It will be my swan song, I would like to say, because we gave back something to the community that maybe not everybody could have done. We put a lot of heart and soul into this project, and I would say we, myself and Steve, because I know that we knew what we were delivering. There were just parts and pieces of the building that we kept because we wanted to put it back, and we wanted to make sure that we were keeping the old with the new, because I feel like that is exactly what this was. This was a beautiful building that just needed a little bit of updating. So thank you very much for your time. I'm very nervous to speak in front of people, so I appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, but I'll give it back to you, Hansy.
Nervous, but no one can mess with Emily. Thank you so much, Emily. So if any of you want Haynes Group to bid on your project, make sure that you contact Emily Bullseye. So in terms of my introduction with Studio Luz Architects, we were founded in 2002. We're based in Rosendale. I founded the office with my partner, Anthony Piamarini, who was very much part of the project, doing a lot of the construction administration for the project. I just would like, because of the title of the symposium, I like to talk a little bit about access very quickly. And I'm going to go through these slides really fast because I think I only have now 20 minutes. But in terms of access, for almost 18 years, even, I identify as Latina. The most perfect project I would say one of the most ideal project was having a client like Alex and having a program like Sociedad Latina. It's one of this concept of like for us, by us, and I really believe in that. And so how do I get myself at the table? I would say that it could have been actually by accident. So one of the board members for Sociedad Latina, Freddie Velez, our kids go to school together. And I recall Freddie saying that when Sociedad Latina was looking for an architect, he mentioned Studio Luz. And so, this is board membership of many Latin people, but if you don't have any representation, you're not going to get even your name mentioned at the door. So we went through the interview process, and I was so admired and so grateful to be at the table for an opportunity for an interview. And so I was able to convince the board and Alex that we were the right architects for them. I think it was one of just ethics and mission that we both had same kind of mission, which was to really help our community and to do that with our services. So in terms of, where is Sociedad Latina? So you can begin to see the neighborhood. It's, by Fenway. It's close to the Roxbury Crossing T station. In terms of, the pressures that are around Sociedad Latina, you do have a lot of institutions, as Alex mentioned, Longwood Medical, you have Wentworth, you have Northeastern, right up. And so you have a lot of this kind of institutional pressure, coming into kind of Mission Hill. And so what happens over time, we did this, we heard of this kind of pressure through Alex, and what we did in our office was to look at the planning of this neighborhood. So we pulled up 1975 land use maps, and we know that Sociedad Latina located to Mission Hill in 1981. And so you can begin to see all around it, it was mostly residential. And the blue that you see is it's the institutional, like university or medical services. And then you have a very, it edges kind of industrial, and then where the T station is, you have a little bit of commercial. And when we begin to see the current land use map, you can begin to see all the blue kind of fragmentation just became a large mass, and began to actually exist on Tremont Street. So you begin to see the trend, the almost a gentrification happening. And so it was really important for Sociedad Latina to acquire the building. So if their existence is 50 years, they can have permanence in this neighborhood and serve the community. So in terms of the demographics, we quickly look at, what were the demographics that existed in Mission Hill. And Sociedad Latina majority serves Latino population, but also serves Haitians and Cape Verdeans. And Mission Hill has a large Dominican Republic population demographic. So this building is really important, and is one for us to consider today in the city of Boston. If neighborhoods are majority Latino communities, what buildings or social services actually exist in these neighborhoods? And so I think Sociedad Latina is a really great example of its impact and how it can transform youth in the neighborhood. So in terms of the building, as it was already mentioned, it was a 3-story building. It was a residential, because of the residential zoning, it was a residential structure. It had a very long deferred maintenance. So there was a lot of problems with the building infrastructure. So you can begin to see that, right around the lintels, there's some diagonals cracking. It was failing. You had lintel that was failing within the building. In terms of engaging with us, we were first engaged to do a feasibility study. This was started in 2016. So it took 5 years to realize this vision that Alex had, which was to acquire the building and renovate it to create a new home. In terms of the zoning, we were only able to perhaps go up 1 story, maybe go a little bit at the rear. And so we were asked to do a feasibility study to understand what was the financial implications of upgrading and kind of fixing the different maintenance of this building. And you can begin to see that we had to replace a lot of the mental lintels. There were only single pane windows. We had to up with the energy code and do more insulated windows to work with the issues that they had with mechanical. Their sewage was not appropriately sized. We had to put a lot of new, we had to do a lot of civil engineering onto the site. We had to do a lot of stormwater management onto the site. So majority of the project was a lot infrastructural and very little architectural in terms of its budget. And one of the things that we did that I thought was pretty impactful was they did so much performance on the ground floor that I thought it was really important to showcase that to the public. And so you can begin to see that right now you had 1 bay of storefront. We actually expanded that storefront so we can capture that corner and capture that performance when the kids were performing on the ground floor. And so a lot of the windows didn't even match. You had white windows, you had brown windows, all different types of windows. And then at the rear, you had openings that were boarded up. So immediately we wanted to make sure that we optimized the lighting and upgraded all the windows. So in terms of the feasibility study, it was just for them to have Sociedad Latina was to have an understanding what was going to be the cost to upgrade this building. So we worked with a cost estimator. It was Vermeulen, and we looked at the minor schemes to the most kind of maximum scheme. And part of the building did have this kind of atrium space in the middle, which was not being used. And that allowed us to maximize that space and put in an elevator to make this building ADA accessible. So it had issues with accessibility. And so by putting an elevator, anyone can really access all the floors. And then in terms of the minimum renovation, you can begin to see 400,000, for a minimum scheme, it was about 20-30% of the construction cost. So about 75% was just for infrastructure. And then in terms of the maximum scheme, where we were renovating to the rear, maybe maximizing one floor, doing a complete interior renovation, we're looking at almost a $4 million project, which Sociedad Latina did not have did not have the means to do that. They wanted to make sure that they can renovate this building and still be in existence. So it was really important for us to balance something that was financially doable for the organization. So in terms of the Community Preservation Act, I was so excited that it was passed in 2016 when we actually started the project. And if some of you might not know, that Community Preservation Act is basically funding that supports preservations of public space, affordable housing, or historic sites. And this building was not necessarily a historic building per se, but it was a building that had lived in the community for a while and needed to preserve the function of that building for at least the 30 years in terms of its programming. So Sociedad Latina did apply for this, and it provided $850,000, which is a substantial amount of funding. But the reason I show this is because an architect has to work through all of these kind of financial buildup for the project, but also to showcase how important it is for the city to advocate for fundings to allow for projects like this to exist in a city, for it to be doable. So in terms of storefront design, it was important for us to introduce ideas of color. The image on the bottom right is what kind of, it's like working with the existing and maybe working with graphics. And at the end, we had to bring this project forward to Boston Landmarks Commission. And it was asked of us to ensure that we worked with the composite panel knee wall that was kind of historic to the building typology. And so I think we did a really good combination of working with kind of a historic language of those storefronts of that time. It was really important for the Boston Landmarks Commission to preserve the copper aging. So what they didn't want to happen was what happened across the building, which is they painted it all black. So there was an idea that we needed to preserve the copper aging of the project that you see in these bay projections. And so you can begin to see how we expanded the storefront on both corners to have a very balanced kind of entry, but also we needed to provide an accessible entry because as you can see at the front corner, there's a step up, but the topography allowed for the second door to be accessible entry for those that are in wheelchair. So this is what you have at the very end, where all the we did repointing, where some of the lintels were replaced. We replaced all the windows, and we pretty much provided Sociedad Latina with a good kind of bones of the building. And then this is just kind of completed. So they're still in process of the branding and the graphic design that is yet to come. But you can begin to see, the before and the after for the project. And these are the youth that are being served by the organization. In terms of community engagement, we had to hold a couple of workshops with the youth. And so in the community workshops that Studio Luz architects did with the community, with the youth, with the staff, with the board, we asked them certain questions like, when you walk through the door, what would you like to see here? And you can begin to see by the hierarchies of the word that youth was really important for them. Art was really important, color, culture. This is what spoke to the community. And then we asked another question, how can the surrounding community be invited here? Events was really important for them, a comfortable space. And then it was really important that that corner performance space was extremely flexible. So it provided a space for learning. It provided a space for meditation, for community gathering, for music performance, even to host, the mayor candidates to speak to the youth about their ideas and their vision. So, what space are the most important for you that you would want us to consider during the renovation? And so it was important that we considered, like the room, the music, the floor, and this provided a lot of feedback in terms of how do we rethink the interior renovation and organization of the building. And then lastly, I love this, how can identity be reflected in space? What colors and materials do you identify as your cultural aesthetic? And you have youth, Latino, and I was blown away with, not all Latin folks are all the same. We are varied, and I love this concept of the Dominican faceless dolls, which I was not familiar with at that time. So, this idea that the faceless dolls were, first created in Dominican Republic in 1981. And, the idea that it was faceless was, because it was not about representing a very particular individual ethnicity, that it represented a mixture of all people. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of takeaway in terms of like, how can a building, collectively represent many different identities, but also be culturally specific, to a nationality. So these were some of the architectural, I would say, challenges. And then in terms of the existing plan, you can begin to see that the residential building typology really created this kind of double-loaded corridor with 3 different stairs and compartmentalized rooms. So it didn't allow for a lot of collaborations or conversations per se. And so what we took from the workshop outcomes was this idea of flexibility, civic engagement, our production, and that these spaces were constantly kind of changing. So, semi-open, visibility, youth-friendly, mobile furniture, those were really important for the community. And so, if you're having a budget that is 20-30%, what is the most impactful thing that you can do? We really just created flexible rooms by having flexible partitions and being able to flip the program where things make sense. Like, for the music recording room, it's better to have it at the rear on the first floor. To get rid of that front staircase, to give it back to a better kind of reception space, reception gathering space, to allow for the maker space to be closed off if there needs to be a meeting to take place. And then this idea of the second floor, putting the kitchen at the rear, that you can have a kitchen, you can maybe provide a rentable situation where they could also spill to a larger gathering, or you could close it off to a conference room during the day. So that's really what we did, which was, I'm kind of being more conscientious of time. So this is really just diagrams at what we did in terms of like minimum design changes, but large impact in terms of the programming. So the before was the compartmentalization, and then the right is what are the walls that we took it down to allow for flexibility and expansions of space. And then you can begin to see, before the renovation, where you have the entry stair, how now you can have a corner to offer drinks, people coming, reception, then the full focus being that performance space. So, as this has a lot of integrated audio, projection screens coming down. It's really very to the, high art here in terms of technology. And then I just show kind of the before and then after. There's these large sliding doors, which allows you to enter back to the arts room. And then these are some images of, right now they're still in the process of getting furniture, but this at least shows you the flexibility of the space of how it's being offered right now. So I love this, that all of a sudden, you go from a gathering collective space to all of a sudden a workshop, where each of them have their laptop and also ability to have performances. And then the rear, that's where they have their music recording space. And we show kind of the before and then after, like there's an idea that there's still visibility, but it being acoustically sound. So the idea that music doesn't really affect the workstations above the floor was considered. And then on the second floor, again, we did the same strategies, like just cutting up some of the walls, allow for ultimate flexibility for the space. These are the makerspace that could be completely closed or open. And this is the previous STEM spaces, how it was used in other facilities, and now it can be brought in. This was kind of before, and then this is after. And you can begin to see how the spaces caters for individualizations or larger group. Again, here's the kitchen and the gathering. This is probably one of the really nicest social spaces that was designed, and really just allows for it feeling like a home, for folks that consider Sociedad Latina as a home. So that's kind of the domestic aspects of the project. And then the spill out space right next to the kitchen, as you can see, where it can be a conference room, multimedia, you can have Zoom and in-person conference. So then this is the third, floor in terms of you have the HR right at the corner, which, we did custom furniture to maximize the staffing in that space, and then to allow for there to be more one-to-one off the hallway to allow for that more intimate, programming that is required for the project. And so here you can begin to see just some images of the space. And then here's the kind of very simple, custom furniture that follows the both fronts for the HR. And that's it. Business. Sorry, I went really fast, but I want to make sure that let me stop sharing, that we can leave some time for questions and answers.
Great, thanks so much, Hansy. This was really wonderful to hear about the collaborative process that is clearly embedded in the programming of the organization, but then also between the architects and the construction manager. So thank you so much for the presentation. I think questions from the audience are still filling in here. So please write in anything or just raise your hand and we'll call on you if you have a question in the audience. Let's see, Hansy, did you have, I know you had some sort of backup points that you were going to make if we had time, maybe while we wait to see if anyone has a question.
Sure. And so I did write some questions that I can ask as a beginning point, just to, have questions coming in if there are any. So I think this is I can give this to Emily while we wait for Alex to come back. But one of the questions I had for Emily is, what process would you change from the traditional client contractor architect hierarchical relationship to allow you to do more projects like Sociedad that serves communities of color?
I would say that I would, just let me repeat the question. You're asking what we would do at Haynes Group to be more involved in the nonprofit association?
Yeah, and also, we follow a very traditional path of relationship between the client to the contractor to the architect. Is there any restructuring that needs to happen to allow for you to be involved with more projects like this?
I think it's engagement with the architect in general, and then also working directly with the client's architects from the beginning. So I think that, we've kind of started to develop this process. Definitely with Haynes Group, we're very architect engaged. So I think it would be partnering more with this community that would allow us to do more of this work. Hansy, I know that we've been in touch on a couple projects, and it's great. It's an honor for us, and honestly, would like to do it a little bit more.
So I know Janelle has a question. Janelle, do you want to answer it yourself? Do you want to ask yourself?
Oh, I didn't know that I had the ability to unmute myself. I have two questions. One for when, I don't know if Alex is back. I'm reading my question right now. Okay. Now that the space is completed, what are the impressions of the students, the community, now that they're able to inhabit kind of that transformation from their story, their own words? And then for Hansy, oftentimes when we are working with youth, we seek opportunities where they can, quote unquote, shadow the process, like ACE mentoring, for instance, where they have the ability to see a little bit behind the scene what goes on when an architect or an engineer is doing solutions such as a building they will inhabit. So I was wondering if there was an opportunity for something like that, and maybe there is still an opportunity in the future for something like that.
Thank you, Janelle, for joining us. I'm going to have Alex answer your first question.
Sure. Thank you, Janelle, for your question. She's on our board. I'm so excited that she's here. So I think the youth are very excited. The fact that they have, you saw one of the pictures of when we were hosting one of the mayoral candidates, and we were able to, with COVID protocols, we can only have so many people. So we were able to have youth on different floors, and then we were able to patch in the candidates. And so that was really cool. I think being able to have just like a clean, beautiful space and have all the technology is really excited the youth. I think the youth that are the most excited are our alumni. And they have seen, because they were, we've been talking about this for many, many years. And we are, because of COVID, we haven't been able to have a celebration yet. So I think we haven't heard from everybody, but just people who've walked by or we've shared the picture with our alumni. I think they're the most excited because they were the ones that were in the workshops with Hansy and her team. And they were the ones who were really giving, this is, what we want to see. And I know that they're really excited for Sociedad, and also wish that they could have been there, as young people in that building. So we have definitely a lot of positive feedback. And then our community, just, community partners, et cetera, the community as a whole just has walked by, and we used to have these really, really ugly grates. I don't know if you guys, those chain link grates, we had one of our neighbors complain about it, and those were actually put in by the city. They were city approved. So it wasn't in our control, but it's so nice not to have that, it looks so terrible. So we get a lot of compliments, but not everyone has been able to be in the building yet. So I can't wait till we do a ribbon cutting and people will be able to walk through the building. And we're really so grateful that Wayfair has donated all the furniture in the building. So we're getting in our last shipment, so we should be able to be all set up. We hope to have ribbon cutting in the fall during Latino Heritage Month, so we can celebrate Latino Heritage Month and celebrate the building. and we'll do some indoor tours and some outdoor stuff. And we have a little cute backyard too that we use. So we're intending to have a really good time and showcase the building.
Janelle, to answer your question about shadowing, it was a 5-year project, and I can tell you what Studio Luz Architects does. We actually do sponsor ACE mentors by donating to their programs. So Studio Luz Architects has done donations to keep that program going. We have had Wentworth interns working on the Sociedad Latina project, just recently helping Sociedad Latina with its furniture procurement. And so also I brought Joshua, who is the Wentworth intern, to Sociedad Latina as a space to show, like, you know, you've been working in these plans, but look at now the space and provide mentorship in that way, in that fashion. So I think that's how we've done it through, you know, through co-ops, you know, but not necessarily a particular ACE mentor, you know, coming here. I do that through through academia.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
I think this would be for Hansy. So as I'm also an architect, and I'm sure many of our attendees are, what advice would you give to individuals or architecture firms who want to get more involved in projects that have this community engagement aspect, but are maybe going at it from a pro bono standpoint, or they just don't know where to start? They don't know how to get connected with clients like this.
Yep. So that's really great question, Emily. And I had one of those questions to Alex, which was, you know, how can architects better serve organizations like yourself? And I think that comes to maybe potentially answering your question. I would say that, you know, learning from Alex gave me the realization that many of these organizations have been declining. And so I think it's something where we need to advocate as a designer. You know, in your case, I would say to pressure the city to and also developers. You know, when they want housing, I just did it yesterday on a walkthrough. If you want housing, I said, well, where's the equivalent of the YMCA that kept kids out of trouble in your housing project? You know, and so I think that's one way to do it. The whole kind of pro bono aspects is kind of another interesting question. We stopped doing competitions because of the investment earlier on, and we still do it. What we do is we started the nonprofit organization Race, which is all that effort and money. We actually go out to communities and work with them to provide public art into their neighborhoods. So I think you have to find a way, go to a community that you want to serve, but don't necessarily assume that you have all the answers. It's an equal partnership. I call it equitable partnerships, where you're there to learn from each other, but mostly to use your skills of out of the box thinking for solutions. So that's kind of my feedback. But maybe I can ask Alex, what, you know, how can architects better serve organizations that are similar to yours?
Well, I think what you said is so important, Hansy. When you look at the landscape and talking about the Latino community, in the last 20 years, we have seen so many closures of these organizations where they've had to merge or downsize. If you look at La Alianza Hispana, which was like 20, 30 years ago, the largest nonprofit Latinx organization in the city, is now relegated to a very small space near Mass and Cass, had to sell their building. And that goes to Latino-led organizations get less than 1% of philanthropic dollars to their organization. So it's a larger issue of, I think you're so right. So there's a few avenues. I think giving back on your projects is so important, giving back money. But I think one way to get involved is to get on a board. And as you said, I think partner, that's so important, because I think oftentimes organizations like ours, people make assumptions. There's a lot of stereotypes that we don't know what we're doing. I would say we really know what we're doing. The fact that we're still around, that we make the magic happen when we fundraise and we take all this different kinds of money and make it work, that's pretty magical. And so I think coming in from like a space of humility and partnering with the organization and asking like, what do organizations need? I think that's like a perfect way to just make those connections. Because as you said, if my board is predominantly Latinx, and that's how they knew who you were, right? And that goes to not having networks. So our organizations like ours don't have the networks to be connected and mainstream. So I think being able to be of service, being able in your own projects to give money back to those organizations, work with those organizations, see, what are their needs, what ways you can help. And then in your own circles, I think like changing philanthropy, changing the mindset of philanthropy. We've had all these protests this year. People have all these Black Lives Matter signs on their front door, but really take some action. So it's not about just putting a sign up or putting a pin on and saying like, I'm down with the cause. Like it has to be action oriented, getting involved in different communities. The only way I think we're going to change this is we just have to break down these silos. So I think just approaching organizations like, if Hansy had come and said to me or, Emily or whoever, I would have been so excited, like, that you took an interest in an organization. You walk down the street, you see an organization, you're like, hey, I really want to know about that organization. How can I be helpful? These organizations always need help and we never not need help. So I hope I was able to answer that question a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And
from here, Emily, you can go and help Alex with Sociedad Latina. You can start a whole architecture.
Yeah. No, and I was
workshop.
just going to say, if you make the effort to ask what the organization needs, you usually get an answer that you weren't expecting. So stepping out and asking is so important. Yeah. Anyone else want to pitch in here? Otherwise, I think we've had a really great session. I appreciate everyone's time so much. I hope everybody got their AA credits. It's in the chat. And yeah, I'll just give a minute.
I just want to shout out to Wentworth Institute also, because they're an amazing partner. We work with them and they are awesome. So I can't say enough about, in the world of institutions, I'm not always happy. And I'm very happy. They always meet us more than halfway. And they have done so much for not just Sociedad Latina, but just like our neighborhood. So I just want to give them a real big shout out.
Alex, I heard the dean of the architecture department was going to come to this talk. I didn't understand why, but now I know. That's fantastic.
Yeah, actually, and we have long-standing, and they have a new pres too who's going to come to visit us also. So I can't say enough with all their volunteers and just how they've helped us so much. They're even helping now with just like the purchasing of all of our equipment for our makerspace and helping us to make sure that the limited funds we have, that they're spent really well for the long term. So sorry to interrupt you, Emily.
That's great. That's great.
Thank you, everyone. Again, Emily, Alex, thank you so much. BosNOMA, and Women in Design, thank you for putting this awesome intersection symposium, much needed. Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope everyone joins us to at least one other event this week. Let's have a great night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Janelle, as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hansy. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.